Thanks very much. Well, the Fiscal clip, as we know, just around the corner. Most of our elected representatives now have left Washington and gone home for the holidays.
Oh, lovely. What are the chances that the two sides can rise above and reach a deal before January 1st? Representative Levin is the ranking member on the House Ways and Means Committee. Also joining us, former Senator and CNBC contributor Judd Gregg. Good to see you, Senators. Thanks very much for joining us. Representative Levin, let me kick this off with you. You say you want the Speaker to rise above his role and put the country first. What exactly would you like him to do?
I think he has to go back and talk to the President of the United States. I think also to his counterparts in the Senate and try to figure this out. I think he's faced with a radicalized Republican conference. I think that very much tied his hands and really overcame him yesterday. I think, though, he must not be deterred by it. He needs to be the Speaker of the entire House and try to avoid our going over the fiscal cliff. As you've discussed, it would have immense consequences for taxpayers who face the alternative minimum tax, for 2 million unemployed people. We just should not do that. It would have economic consequences, and you would be discussing them when you do.
What should the President do in that same vein?
The President has really been forthcoming. He and the Speaker talked about a major package with tax increases and also some budget cuts. So they had some major discussions, but the Speaker goes back, he goes to his caucus, and he decides to have a different strategy, one that has a very different tax proposal, and then they bring so-called Plan C up that has very major cuts for kids, for seniors, for Meals on Wheels. That was a mistake, and it failed.
Senator Gregg, are we going back to the period with this, the failure of Plan B? Does that bring us back to the period where the very conservative wing of the Republican Party is opposing the Speaker when it sounded like after the election that there was an air of compromise in Washington and we might get a deal done? Have we gone several steps backwards because of the failure of Plan B last night?
Well, we didn't go forward, but I also don't think we went backwards that far. I think the Speaker made it pretty clear what he could deliver if he could get the President and he on the same page. He said he would be able to pass a plan if he reached an agreement with the President. He's made it very clear that the way he feels that must be structured is $1 of savings for every dollar of revenue. And there's still a gap on that number of between $200 and $400 billion. So I believe there's still an opportunity here for the President and the Speaker, as Sandy said, to sit down in a room quietly and hopefully without a lot of staff and get this done.
But it sounds like the conservative Republicans in the House are back to the situation where they won't tolerate any tax increase at all. I mean, isn't that what they opposed last night?
No, I don't think so. I think last night was a statement that within the Republican conference in the House, there's a very strong feeling about not raising taxes, and they're not going to do it unless they get the spending cuts that go along with it. And I think that's what that was about last night. I think if there had been a package which was signed on to by the President, that they knew was legitimate, was real, was going to go to the Senate and be passed, that had been a comprehensive package in the $2 trillion range, which is what the President and the Speaker have been talking about, I think that type of package could have been done. But when you're just talking about... Excuse me, go ahead.
Let me just interject, because we know each other well. I don't think that was the meaning of yesterday. Essentially, a lot of your former colleagues, the people who I think have a rather different view of issues than you do, essentially said to the Speaker, look, we will not accept any increase in taxes, even on the very wealthy. The Speaker tried to kind of assuage them by saying it wasn't a tax increase because it would have gone into effect anyway. But then when they talked about having automatic tax increases below $1 million, then the Republicans called that the biggest tax increase in the world or in the history of this country. So essentially you have a radicalized group within the Republican caucus, as Steve LaTourette said, that really essentially is going to help take this over the cliff unless the Speaker acts as Speaker of the entire House and not only the leader of his dysfunctional conference.
Representative Levin, what are we talking about in terms of actually moving the needle on the debt and deficit with these tax increases? How much money do you really raise with these tax increases? And then I guess the next question naturally is, where are the spending cuts? What are you willing to give on?
Let me just mention what was discussed apparently between the Speaker and the President. About $1.2 trillion in tax increases, and they would come for income over $250,000. Most of it income above that. And essentially it would have raised $1.2 trillion. On the spending side, they discussed cuts of about $1 trillion. For example, $400 billion from health. So the Speaker and the President had, I think, some meaningful discussions. I think the President was more than forthcoming, but essentially the Speaker decided to go back to the conference on a very different path, thinking he could pick up a conference that had been radicalized. It failed.
Yeah.
Well,
there's still an opportunity, though, here.
Everybody's sticking to their guns.
Excuse me. Where does it restart, Senator Gregg? Where does it restart again, do you think?
I think it restarts where basically the President and the Speaker left off, and I think the Speaker in his press conference today made it pretty clear that that's where it restarts. And I also think he's been very definitive in saying that if he reaches an agreement with the President, he'll be able to get it through his caucus. But to getting an agreement with the President, he's been equally definitive to say we've got to have the spending reductions to match those $1.2 trillion in revenues. And that's where the problem has been. It's always been right now it's a $200 to $400 billion problem, depending on how you evaluate those spending cuts. But it seems to me it's still a bridgeable event. And people like Sandy Levin, who's the most senior guy on Ways and Means and a serious and very effective player in Washington, I think can push everybody towards getting back in the room and trying to get it going again.
All right,
we miss you, Judd.
Thanks very much, gentlemen.
I'm so happy to be in New Hampshire now, Sandy.
You do look happy there, Judd. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. All right, we're heading toward the close.